Hello, BookTube. I was watching earlier today the latest video from Crimson Rogue. I'm sure since he has 10,000 subscribers that you're all familiar with his channel. And one of the regular features on his channel is something he calls The Book Was Better, where he compares a movie and a book. And this time around he did Andrew Stanton's 2012 movie John Carter, which adapts Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars character for the big screen. The movie was a colossal flop and earned a lot of scorn from critics. And Crimson is a rather hilariously angry young man, as it is. So when I saw the thumbnail, I went into it thinking, well, he's going to rip it to shreds. But no. He watched it fairly and honestly, has a very good cinematic eye and also a very good writer's ear. And aside from some funny nitpicking, he really couldn't find much wrong with the movie. And he could have gone further. If he'd wanted, he could have said all the ways in which the movie was better than the book. And that was almost heresy for me to say, because I love the books. I reread them all the time. But the first book especially, A Princess of Mars, which started fish out of water science fiction as we know it today, created a huge chunk of the genre that we know today, and is uncredited completely with that. Also, he hit it very lightly, but it could have been hit much harder, is the inspiration for Superman. But especially that first book, A Princess of Mars, you read it with an objective eye, and it's a mess. It's stodgy and boring and long stretches. It was clearly written for serialization. The dramatic arc is buried 2/3 of the way through. There's a 7-year gap that's covered in one sentence. There's nothing like that in the movie. The movie hurtles along and makes a kind of sense. I think that a lot of the casting was wrong, but I loved it. And it got me thinking about a perennial subject on this channel, where not to compare, not to have the nerve to compare 1,000 subscribers with 10,000, but still, I have often brought up the differences between books and movies and how the movie adaptation is almost always better. And that got me thinking that I've been meaning to get into specific examples, and I thought the one I would pick today, I would just go straight for the A game and go for not just a book that is beloved, but a bookish book that is beloved, a book about loving books. And that is Helene Hanff's 1970 book, 84 Charingcross Road. This is an epistolary novel about, or autobiography, it doesn't matter, one way or another. I think it's cleaned up for fiction. But one way or another, it's an epistolary account of a New York writer, a woman living in New York, who strikes up a correspondence with Marks & Co., an antiquarian bookshop on 84 Charing Cross Road in London. And although she lives minutes away from New York's old bookseller row and could easily get all the copies of the book she wants in New York, she likes the idea of England. She goes to movies in order to see the streets. She likes the idea of English literature living in the streets and places where it's named. And it doesn't take long. She's an outgoing sort, and it doesn't take her long to strike up a personal correspondence with the manager of the shop, Frank Dole. And that's all the book is. It's a very slight thing, and that's all it is her bouncing requests for miscellaneous books off him and working in the odd mention of events in her life, and him doing likewise. And the correspondence goes on for years, decades. And she accumulates a library from Marks & Co. And in the book, there comes a point, after years and years and years of corresponding, I want to draw one example. I mean, we could talk about the book and its adaptation at length, but I want to talk about one example just to sharpen what I'm talking about here. In the book, at the end, she's in the midst of corresponding with Frank Dole about some book or other, and she gets a letter. Dear Miss, I have just come across the letter you wrote to Mr. Dole on the 30th of September last, and it is with great regret that I have to tell you that he passed away on Sunday, the 22nd of December. The funeral took place last week on Wednesday, the 1st of January. He had been with the firm for over 40 years, and naturally it has come as a great shock to Mr. Cohen, particularly coming so soon after the death of Mr. Marks. Do you still wish us to try and obtain the Austins for you? And the next letter is a note from Frank's wife, talking about how she'll miss him and how her daughters are wonderful. That's it. That's all that happens in 84 Charingcross Road. Now, years and years later, in 1982, it was adapted for the stage by James Roose Evans, and it was the performance is amazing. If you can ever see this performance, if it's ever done, you should do it. It's amazing. The stage, is the bookshop and also her study, and the actors are in the separate parts of the set with lighting shifting between them, but they never look at each other. But their responses, their body language, their language, as the letters continue throughout the production, becomes closer and closer. They are getting closer and closer. Even though they're sharing a stage, they're no longer quite as separated. It's wonderfully thought out. And in that production, at the end, when she gets that letter, the stage directions are: in the darkened shop, the shelves and windows swivel and become filled with copies of the book 84 Charing Cross Road. Sound of a jet plane. Lights fade on Helene, who is in tears. So in the stage play, she writes the book 84 Charing Cross Road, and its success allows her to travel to London and allows her to go to 84 Charing Cross Road, which in the book she never does. And the last scene of the play, she's there. She's at the shop. He's dead. He's gone. She missed him. But the last line is, how about this, Frankie? I finally made it. And a few years after that, in 1987, David Jones did a movie adaptation of 84 Charing Cross Road, starring Anthony Hopkins and Anne Bancroft. And in the movie, the climactic scene, Anne Bancroft happens by a street demonstration in New York, and she asks the cop what's going on, and he mouths off to her, and she mouths off to him right back, and he picks her up and puts her in the paddy wagon, and she's outraged. And we next see her storming into her apartment. She takes a moment to get a letter from her mailbox from Frank. Then she storms into her apartment, pours herself a drink, turns on the TV. She's outraged still at having been locked up. And on the TV is a news account of the protest, and she sees herself being loaded into the paddy wagon. And all of a sudden her outrage becomes humor. She chuckles. It's kind of funny in retrospect. And she backs up to her couch, watching the news, sits down on the letter and remembers it. And she takes it, and she opens it, and half-heartedly, as she's watching the TV, and reads it. The exact same letter that I just read. And in the scene, Anne Bancroft, who has gone in the span of 4 minutes from outraged to wryly amused, crumples with grief, crying on her couch. And when we cut back in the movie to the end, to the final scene, she's spreading out her books on the floor of her apartment, and she's narrating a letter that she's writing to someone in which she says, maybe it's just as well that I never got there. There is no book tour. There is no, I finally made it. There is no scene like that in the movie. But the final thing that we get in the movie, after she's done narrating that letter, is just a close-up of her face at the window. And it's obvious that she is still utterly ruined by grief. Now, the reason I bring up that moment in all three of these things is because by any objective standard, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, coming all the way forward to today, if we are honest, if we are objective, we will say that dramatic moment, that beat, is coming throughout the whole of this story and has to be done well. Now, in the play, we get a taste of it. She's weeping as the lights go down, and then there's a sentimental ending. In the movie, we're gut-punched by it. It is the point, it is the dramatic point of it all, is that she's ruined by the loss of this man that she's never met. And if we're being objectively fair, in the book, which we all love, I love it too, that moment is flubbed. Plain and simple. because it isn't even there. It doesn't exist at all. You look in vain for it. It's not there. And that's an example, just one example from a very bookish book. That is one example of how a dramatic presentation, whether it be for the stage or for screen, actually improves the book. Even though you'd think an epistolary book about books could be only ruined by an adaptation of some other medium. So I thought I would go for the prime A example, but I'd love to do more examples. Just let me know. I would love to talk about this more, to explain what I mean. But in the meantime, I'll have to hope Crimson Rogue isn't watching this. I think he has mystical powers. I don't want to be on the wrong side of him. But anyway, I'll see you soon, BookTube. Thank you.